This is Jason Clemmons, Doctor of Chiropractic at the Rock Health and Wellness Center, and this is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. This is Wednesday, February 21st, and we are live tonight. It seems like we just haven't been live much lately, but we're live tonight right here from the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios in Lubbock, Texas, and live on 98.7 Walk by Faith Radio and 1420 AM Lubbock Christian Nation. And I got to drive back from Dallas on Sunday, or actually from Arlington, where we went and watched Red Raiders play baseball. And I got to pick up the radio station on, I think I was out there on the other side of Post, and with that 1420 AM station, got to pick it up out there. So I know that there's some reach around this area that you guys that are listening to the station, that you can hear from us. And so I hope you guys, all you guys out there in West Texas, are doing well. I hope all of you who are watching us on social media are doing well, wherever you might be in the world. Whether you're watching us on Facebook, YouTube, or X, we're out there. You can catch us. You can listen to us. And I'm glad to be back in the office tonight. Last night was just a fun time. We every quarter, I get the opportunity to go over and speak to the WISE group, WISE, and that's at Lake Ridge Chapel. It's a funeral home right here in Lubbock. It's actually right across the street from my office and my office complex. And so last night was an opportunity, and the girl that puts it on, Laura Landis, she's just a go-getter, man. She's fantastic. She does a great job, and she's invited me she started last year, inviting me over to speak to the group. So I think last night was the third time, and she kind of picks the subjects based on what she'd like for all of her group to hear. And the first two times we talked about brain, and then we talked about post-traumatic stress and how to handle that. And then last night she wanted to talk about diabetes. And so I was like, you betcha, we can talk about diabetes. And so we went over there and talked about it. And we're going to do that tomorrow night on this show. I'll load up the PowerPoint that we did last night over there, and that will be tomorrow night's show, when we will get in and talk about diabetes. And we're not talking about diabetes from diabetes treatment. We're talking about diabetes from how it disrupts the nervous system. And that's why it's important to a chiropractor, because that's what we're all about, is trying to take care of your nervous system. So we want to make sure that your nervous system is functioning properly, and diabetes will mess up your nervous system. And there's some new slides in that some of the stuff we talked about, but there's some new slides in there where we talk about just diffusion, and I think you'll like it. So we'll save that for tomorrow night. It'll be a good show. We'll do that tomorrow night. But it was great. It was lots of fun over there. I really appreciate those people. And if you want to get involved in that group, most of them are older folks. They meet like on the first and third Tuesday from 5:30. They usually get there between 5 and 5:30, and we usually start about 5:30, from 5:30 to 6:30, and sometimes some of us go a little bit long. But the WISE group, if you want to look it up, it's Memorial Designers, MEMORIALDESIGNERS, memorialdesigners.net. And that's their website. And then right at the top, the very top of the page, on the left-hand side, there's a there's a link that says WISE, and then you can find out all about the different things that they have. They have a lot of stuff going on over there. You can just click on that. Community education designed with everyone in mind. WISE, Wisdom-Inspired Senior Education, is our ongoing effort to engage the Lubbock community in 1-hour workshops taught by local experts. We regularly invite leading professionals to our funeral home to share helpful tools and resources with seniors in our community. It's great. So they had Mardi Gras at the chapel, Valentine's dance, and social. They had us last night. It was Make Life Sweet, Not Your Blood. And then When to Call the Police is the next one in March. What Constitutes a Crime? Stress, the volcano inside of us. Prevention and Tai Chi is going to be in the other one in March. And then there's an advanced planning workshop with Nathan Ziegler, and who's an attorney. So Cool stuff over there. All you got to do is just go to that page, and you can get the information. You'll see Laura on there, and it's great. Really appreciate those people, and really did enjoy talking to them. They're always a fun bunch to talk to. We had a good time last night over at the Wise Group. Um, Article I saw today before we get into the book. And this was from Nature, and I got mixed feelings about Nature, and I'll tell you about it when we get into the book here. But do billionaire philanthropists skew global health research? And it's got a picture of Bill Gates on there, and it's personal priorities too often shape where charitable funding goes by Andy Sterling. It's an article in Nature. And it's an interesting article. It's an interesting article about, we've talked about it over the last few weeks about like what how the whole medical model in America started, how Andrew Carnegie got Abraham Flexner to set it all up, how we followed the German model and all that sort of thing. And so this little article here says global wealth, power, and privilege are increasingly concentrated in the hands of few hyper-billionaires, some including Microsoft founder Bill Gates, come across as generous philanthropists. But as investigative journalist Tim Schwab shows in his latest book, charitable foundations led by billionaires that direct vast amount of money towards a narrow range of selective solutions might aggravate global health and other societal issues as much as they might alleviate them. In The Bill Gates Problem, that's the name of the book, Schwab explores the concerns compelling with a focus on Gates, who co-founded the technology giant Microsoft in 1975 and set up the William H. Gates Foundation in 1994. The foundation spends billions of dollars each year on global projects aimed at a range of challenges from improving health outcomes to reducing poverty, with pledges totaling almost $80 billion since its inception. Schwab offers a counterpoint to the prevailing popular narrative, pointing out how much of the ostensible generosity of philanthropists is effectively underwritten by taxpayers. In the United States, for example, 100,000 private foundations together control close to $1 trillion in assets. Yet up to 3/4 of these funds are often offset against tax. U.S. laws also require only sparse scrutiny of how charities spend their money. So it's a good little article, kind of talking about how if we had these tax dollars instead of them the way that they do that, because they control everything, they control what they want to control instead of letting the people have a chance to control it, but by using their tax dollars. It's a good article. You can look it up in Nature, and it just talks about how it kind of it's just saying, hey, maybe it's not the best thing to do. And I agree. I don't really. I understand the motivation of someone that has billions of dollars or being super rich wanting to help people, but then they get locked into dictating the way it goes, and they're the ones that says, hey, this is the way it's going to be, and then here we go. And so, interesting article. You guys can look it up. Nature. Do billionaire philanthropists skew global health research? So that's the article that I got for you. So tonight is our book review night, and I've been kind of putting this one off for a little bit, a few weeks, maybe a couple months. I don't know when I got the book, but I've been kind of wanting to kind of set it for the right time. And last night when I went to do that health talk, and we were talking about diabetes, right? And so I get there, and as soon as I get there, I have a conversation with a lady in the hallway before the thing starts. And I know this lady, and I said, how's your sister? Because the sister was going to come see me with some neck issues. And then she said, oh, she's fine, and then here we go right into Ozempic and Mounjaro or whatever. She starts telling me about how she she started taking Ozempic or whatever, one of those. I don't remember which brand it was. I think her sister was taking Ozempic, and she was taking another brand. And she starts in telling me how, yeah, she took it for a while, and then she lost 34 pounds, and then she got off of it, and now she's taking it again. And she told me about the conversation she had with her medical doctor, who's a well-established medical doctor right here in town. And she said to me, these were her words, so I don't know if the medical doctor actually said this or not, but this is what the patient reported. And I know very well that sometimes patients get confused about things, and they report things differently than the doctor said them. So I'm not quoting the doctor on this, but she said that the doctor told her, said, look, all these companies are going to get sued out of existence here before too long, so you might as well take it if you want it. I mean, if you want to do it, you might as well take it before that you can't get it anymore. And I was like, okay, well, why would they get sued? Why would they get sued and put out of business? What is it? And I asked her that. Why would they get sued? And she was like, well, I guess because there's some damaging effects, or maybe some people are not doing well with it or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, we'll I mean, that's to be seen whether or not that takes place. And I know whenever a wellness guy talks about something like this, it comes off like I'm bitter towards the whole thing. And I don't like it, but I'm not necessarily bitter. But I just think it ought to be something that ought to be discussed with the people that watch this show, because I'm talking about your health. And that's what I told her last night. I said, what'd you have for breakfast? She said, I didn't have any breakfast. I said, what'd you have for lunch? She said, well, actually, I haven't had any lunch today. And I was like, okay, so you've been fasting since last night. And this was at 5:30 last night when we were having this conversation. So she's almost gone, almost 24 hours. And she said, I had a little bit of almonds. That's like 2 or 3 almonds is the only thing I've had today all day long. And look, when you don't do wellness things, when you don't follow wellness fundamentals, then what you end up with is you end up with having to do the sickness model in order to be healthy. And it doesn't make you healthy. You think it is because you lost 34 pounds. And then I asked her, I said, how much does it cost? How much does it cost for you to do this? And she said $550 a month. She's paying $550 a month for this shot that's supposed to help her lose weight. And it's 100% backed by her medical doctor, who doesn't care one flip about her future, her health, anything about, like, he's just selling the deal, right? He's just selling it to make, it's easy money. It's easy money. You just take a person, just give them whatever they want. I mean, how is that not like drug dealing? I mean, how is that not the same thing? If we wanted to go down and smoke some weed tonight in our own town, how could we not just do that, right? Why would that be any different than like if I wanted some cocaine tonight? And what do y'all care if I go get some cocaine? What difference does it make? How come that's illegal, right? Like, what is the difference between those things? You're just going to get a drug. You're going to your legal drug dealer to get a drug that has nothing to do with you being fat. It has nothing to do with you getting yourself healthy. And that was one of my arguments. Is like one of my ladies said last night, can't you just take it and then get healthy? And then once you're healthy, then you can change your eating habits? It doesn't work that way. That's not the way it works. You don't change your eating habits. 1 out of 100 people, maybe. The rest of everybody, all they did is they subjected themselves to things that were possibly dangerous to them. I don't know if they are or not, but they were possibly dangerous, and it didn't have anything to do with health. So I just got irritated by that conversation with that doctor, and I was like, you know what? I'm going for it tonight. I'm just going to go ahead, and we're just going to get into it. And the book that we're talking about is called Deception. It was written by Rand Paul, Senator Rand Paul. You guys know who Senator Rand Paul is. He's been on lots of those committees and had lots of those conversations with Dr. Fauci and all that sort of thing about where did COVID come from? How did we get COVID? Where did it come from? How come everything was handled the way that it was handled? And it just came from bats, right? It just came from bats in a cave somewhere, and then it jumped, and then all of a sudden we got COVID, right? Well, I'm going to just talk about it, not from my perspective. I'm not going to tell you about it from the way I feel about it. I'm not going to cross any lines as far as that goes. I'm just going to quote you. So I'm just going to read you some of these pages from Deception, the Great Cover-Up, the Great COVID Cover-Up. And this is Rand Paul. So on the back here it says, there were powerful incentives to conceal the truth about COVID. The hundreds of millions of dollars of grants and unreported royalties at stake, and the fear that heads would roll, led to a massive cover-up of government incompetence and complicity. And it almost worked. As Senator Paul argues, while we may never be certain of the pandemic was a result of a lab leak at the Wuhan Institute, COVID-19 is a stark reminder that funding dangerous bioengineering research in a totalitarian country will always be a bad idea. If nothing is done, we risk truly cataclysmic pandemic next time. Rand Paul, an energetic opponent of government overreach, has represented Kentucky in the U.S. Senate since 2011. He and his wife, Kelly, who was a co-creator of this book, live in Bowling Green and are the parents of 3 sons. Now, I'm not a political guy. I don't really get all fired up about Democrats or Republicans and all that sort of thing. I have my own beliefs, but that's not, as a chiropractor, I take care of everybody. And so I'm not reading this book because I'm a Republican supporter in that sense. I'm reading this book because it's the truth from someone inside inside the system that has access to stuff that we don't have access to, that's trying to tell us things about how this whole thing started. And we want to talk about some of the stuff that there is some information. It's public out there to knowledge. There's some information that this was a gain-of-function research project with the United States and China working together, starting in the United States and moving to China into the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and that they had actually applied for a grant in 2018 to do exactly what they did, and they got denied that grant, and they ended up doing it anyway, and that's where we got COVID. Now, then, if that's where we got COVID, where did we get the COVID vaccine from? We got it from the same group of people that were involved in the same thing right there. And who's going to put that out? Who's going to give that to you? Who's going to inject you with the COVID vaccine? The same doctors that are going to give you Wegovy and Ozempic and all that other stuff. And I don't care if you do it. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just letting you know that when you go get your shots, and we stand in line for them, and everybody had to get them, and they lie to you about all this stuff about how you're protecting your grandma and your grandpa and all the people, and you're being selfish if you don't do it. I mean, that's why I'm on the radio right now, because I had enough of it that I had to go tell our mayor to quit calling me a villain. Like, all I'm doing is teaching health and wellness, and I'm doing it within my scope, and I'm not breaking any laws, and that's how I ended up here. So let's just read some of this stuff from the book, and I'll let Rand Paul say these things. In early January 2020, there were reports from Wuhan of a mysterious pneumonia. At first, Chinese officials reported that it did not appear to be passed from human to human, but within days they couldn't contain the lie. Not only was it found to be quite contagious, it was also quickly shown to kill. The cover-up likely began even before Anthony Fauci knew for certain how dangerous the pandemic would become. Previous lab leaks had never killed more than a few thousand people. Fauci would not be fully aware of how rapidly the virus was adapted to humans for several more weeks. What Fauci did know was that he had, for several years now, personally approved gain-of-function research in Wuhan. This is Deception, the Great COVID Cover-Up, Rand Paul, Chapter 1, page 3. That's not from me. I'm just reading the book. The cover. He knew that his reputation in the billion-dollar business of science, depending on distancing himself from the NIH and the NIAID from any research in Wuhan. In a remarkable display of scientific prowess, Professor Wang Zhen Zhang of Fudan University obtained a sample from pneumonia patients and sequenced the virus in an astounding 40-hour sprint. Zhang completed the analysis at 2 a.m. on January 6th. The Chinese government told him in no uncertain terms not to publish anything. Throughout this period, the Chinese were not forthcoming with the truth about pneumonia-causing virus from Wuhan. For weeks, the Chinese government maintained that there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission. The Chinese government also withheld the RNA sequence from the public for several weeks and only revealed it after Zhang and Eddie Holmes, a virologist from the University of Sydney, revealed the sequence in January on virological.org. That same day, China reported its first death from COVID-19. Only when these scientists finally revealed the sequence online did the Chinese government release their own sequencing analysis, an analysis likely completed by at least late December 2019. Redfield catches the scent. In the next weeks, virologists around the world would scramble to analyze the new virus's genome. One virologist, Robert Redfield, he was the head of the CDC, voiced his concern early on that the virus might have originated at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Redfield had been, and let me say this, that's cited right there, and it cites it right here. And you come to the back of the book, and the citations in this book, every chapter is cited, it has citations, and they go on for a lot of pages right here. So the acknowledgments right here from page 425 to 512. So almost 100 pages of citations that Rand Paul puts in the book of where he got this information. Okay, so just right off the bat, the head of the CDC is saying that it may have been there. Redfield had been an Army physician and a professor at the University of Maryland. While in the military, Redfield founded the Department of Retroviral Research. His prestigious career also included serving as chief of infectious diseases at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. As a virologist and co-founder of the University of Maryland's Institute of Human Virology, he was uniquely qualified to delve into the origins of COVID-19. As such, Redfield sounding the alarm worldwide by mid-January of 2020, calling Tedros, the guy, the director of the WHO, Jeremy Farrar, head of Wellcome Trust in the United Kingdom, and of course Anthony Fauci, he contacted each scientist separately with the same urgent message. We had to take the lab leak hypothesis with extreme seriousness. So right off the bat, they're according to Rand Paul, right off the bat, they're talking about the lab leak. Why are they talking about the lab leak? Because they know that it's a lab leak, because they know they've been working on this stuff, that they know that this stuff was going on before that thing took place. And that's exactly what continues in the book. And that's what Rand Paul continues to say. And to Redfield, the origin of the virus, that is, whether it arose naturally from an animal host or leaked from a lab, was an extremely important piece of information. What alarmed Redfield from the beginning was the ease of COVID transmission from human to humans. Previous coronaviruses that came from animals never adapted to transmit or easily from human to human. But COVID-19 was exploding in growth, showing no difficulty transmitting between humans. And he will go on there. So he goes on later on. Even Peter Daszak, who co-authored the findings, the research with Xi in Wuhan. So see if I can, where he introduced Xi in the book, because that was one of the virologists that worked at the lab in Wuhan. I'll just go ahead. Explicitly referred to his research as gain of function. According to emails obtained by the Freedom of Information Act, Daszak responded to NIH officials who approved the resumption of his funding with, "We are very happy to hear that our gain-of-function research funding has paused. The pause has been lifted." And that's exactly what Rand Paul will go in there and he'll talk about, and he uses all kinds of citations about the fact that it did come from a lab, that it was gain-of-function research, which means they're accelerating what a virus can do in a lab way faster than what it would ever do in nature. And he gets over here to, he says, as rumors swirled that the virus might have leaked from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, Farrar's wife, Christine, insists that he ring people close to us so they would understand what was going on in case anything happened. Yeah, he was worried for his life, right? So the furin site telltale. Furin, F-U-R-I-N, is one of the enzymes that activates the genetic code that initiates protein synthesis in cells. All right, we're going to take a break on the radio. We'll be back right after these messages, and we'll just continue this information. I think it's good information for you to know. I just want you to know it. I'm going to try to be as neutral as I can about it, but I think it's important for you to know that you can, so that you can take it with you and understand how you want to make health decisions for yourself. So we'll be right back right after these messages with Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. Furin is one of the enzymes that activates the genetic code that initiates protein synthesis. A cleavage site is a spot for the enzyme to attach to genetic material and serve as a key to activate the making of specific proteins, the building blocks of life. Farrar was alarmed that the coronavirus was the first of its kind to have a furin cleavage site that enhances infectivity and seemed almost designed to infect human cells. Likewise, when Redfield first learned that COVID-19 had a furin cleavage site, he said, "This isn't natural." Redfield, like others, noted that the genetic code that creates COVID-19's furin's cleavage site is the code most often found in humans, not in bats. Bizarrely, the cleavage site was so adapted to humans that it no longer allowed the virus to enter a bat cell at all. So this virus didn't come from a bat. This virus came from the lab, and they put in a furin cleavage site in order for it to be more infectious to humans. If anyone doubts that Fauci and his yes men knew that the lab leak would boomerang and direct blame on them, the emails obtained by the Freedom of Information court orders make this point explicitly. The compressed timeline of phone calls, Zoom conferences, and midnight emails provides a sense for the panic building in the last days of January 2020. These emails show that by January 27th, the level of alarm had risen to a fever pitch. At 6:24 p.m., one of Fauci's deputies, Greg Folkers, emailed talking points for Fauci for that evening's White House press conference. The email reminded Fauci that he had approved NIAID funding for coronavirus research, including research in Wuhan. Folkers goes on to remind Fauci on the main players in the joint research with Wuhan: EcoHealth's Peter Daszak, EcoHealth Alliance, UNC's Ralph Baric, B-A-R-I-C, Ian Lipkin, and Shi Jingli of Wuhan. Folkers even lists the NIAID identity number of the gain-of-function research grant to Baric and Shi. And if you want to look it up, you can look up who Baric is. And hey everybody, we're back. This is Jason Clemmons. This is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC, and this is a book review night, and we are breaking down a book by Rand Paul called Deception, the Great COVID Cover-Up. So, and we're talking about who the players are in this deal. Who are the people that were involved in this joint research? EcoHealth Alliance, Peter's Daszak, UNC's Ralph Baric. So if you want to go look at the work that Ralph Baric has done at the University of North Carolina, one of the things that he's famous for is that he's the guy that has created created mice that have lung tissue that's very similar to human lung tissue. Why did he have to be involved in this deal? Well, he was involved in this deal because he was the one. He was the one that provided the mice that had the lung tissue that were humanized lung tissue. And so that same day across the Atlantic, Farrar sends an email to Fauci. We should use different phones, avoid putting things in emails, and ditch our normal email addresses and phone contacts. In his memoir, Spike, Farrar recounts, I didn't know the term then, but I now had a burner phone, which I could use only for this purpose and then get rid of. Who needs to do that? Who needs to ditch? Who needs to use different phones, avoid putting things in emails, and ditch their normal email addresses? People who are doing things on the level, people who are doing things properly, or people who are doing things shady and know they're going to get in trouble and know they're going to get caught for stuff like that, right? How can anyone not read that not concluded that the pursuit of truth was taking a backseat to the secrecy of covering it up? A day later, January 28th, Farrar called Eddie Holmes, the British evolutionary biologist and virologist. Farrar was worried about the internet discussion that the viruses may have leaked from the Wuhan lab. Farrar wanted to discuss with Holmes a preprint journal article from a few days before he had reported the COVID-19 RNA sequence was 96% similar to another Wuhan virus known as RATG13. And it just goes, it just keeps going about. He responds how it's bad. It's not a natural origin and likely inserted by scientists. Restriction sites are areas of genetic sequences recognized by restriction enzymes. They allow scientists to insert new DNA. Anderson is saying it looks like the nucleotide sequence between the restriction sites is not of natural origin and likely inserted by scientists. And I don't know if it's by now that everybody knows that this is real stuff. I don't know if you guys I think this is just old news, but I thought we covered it anyway. A sickening realization dawns on Fauci's yes men. At 5:23 p.m. on January 31st, 2020, Jeremy Farrar emailed Fauci requesting a phone call. Farrar says he contacted Tony Fauci about the rumors over the origins of the virus and asked him to speak to Christian Anderson at Scripps. The phone number is redacted from the email, but one might reasonably assume it is Farrar's burner phone. Realize it's after 10 p.m. in England. Something big is afoot. Farrar describes his feeling at the time. I remember becoming a little nervous about my own personal safety around this time. I don't really know what I was scared of. Farrar was in a frenzied 24-hour-a-day back and forth with international virologists. His wife reports 17 calls in just one night, all of which were over concerns that COVID-19 might have originated in the lab in Wuhan. And now he can't explain what it was he was afraid of. This beggars belief. Yeah. So there's a start, right? There's a start to it right there. Well, let's go to chapter 5. In chapter 5, it was too little, too late, but the Lancet editor, Richard Horton, finally came clean a year and a half after Daszak used the pages of the once non-political journal to facilitate a cover-up of COVID-19's origins. After being utterly humiliated and used by Peter Daszak, the Lancet finally recognized Dasek's many conflicts of interest. As the Washington Times' Rowan Scarborough put it, the Lancet had a breakup with Peter Daszak, the scientist whose public letter, hosted by the British Medical Journal, protected China's spooky Wuhan laboratory as a pivotal time as the coronavirus began contaminating the world. Editor Richard Horton wrote in December 2021 edition of The Lancet, Daszak and his co-authors argued that the overwhelming majority of scientific opinion supported the view that SARS-CoV-2 originated in wildlife, and they signed off their letter. We declare no competing interest. But what fast became clear is that one author of the Lancet letter did not indeed have an interest to declare. and an incendiary one at that. A direct link to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, including experiments on viral spillovers, events, and recombinant bat coronaviruses. Called before a British Parliament committee, Horton admitted, in this particular case, regrettably, the authors claim that they have no competing interests, and of course, there were indeed competing interests that were significant, particularly in the relation to Peter Daszak. Peter Daszak had crossed the line crossed the line that had always united dispassionate scientists, conflict of interest. The Lancet understood this breach of ethics and tried to make amends. And the NIH, on the other hand, was still actively funding Daszak EcoHealth Alliance into the summer of 2023. This begs the question of whether there was ultimately more to discover concerning Fauci's own culpability regarding NIH funding of Wuhan gain-of-function research. The Lancet's the one that sent the article, the original article, out about where it came from, and these guys were completely involved in this whole thing right here. To go down a little bit further, in fact, when I mentioned to Senator Susan Collins how impressed I was with Sachs, and this Professor Sachs, they picked Columbia's economist Jeffrey Sachs to head the commission. To anyone who might suspect that Lancet allows right-wingers to run the commission, Professor Sachs has a thoroughly progressive resume and, more importantly, a reputation for honesty. So what he's saying is, when I mentioned to Senator Susan Collins how impressed I was with Sachs, she remarked in a lighthearted way, he's Bernie Sanders' favorite economist. When I spoke with Sachs on the phone, he mentioned that he went to undergrad at Harvard with Senator Chuck Schumer. I saw Schumer later in the Senate floor and couldn't resist needling him a bit. I spoke to one of your Harvard classmates today. Yeah, who? Jeffrey Sachs. Schumer got a twinkle in his eye as he responded, yeah, he complains that I'm too conservative. So, the reason that I think that there's some credibility in this book is, it's coming right from the Senate floor, and it's coming right from someone who's right in the middle of the whole thing, and it keeps going, and it talks about the tsunami of gain-of-function evidence builds. Many observers have posited various ways that COVID-19 could have occurred by accident during a gain-of-function research. A worker digging bat guano in South China could have been infected and returned to Wuhan beginning the pandemic. A lab worker could have been bitten by a laboratory animal or infected by aerosol. A gain-of-function coronavirus could have infected a lab worker. All of these possibilities were discounted by Daszak and other Fauci yes-men as fantasies. As time wore on, Fauci would advance the absurd argument that lab workers being bitten and infected by a bat was not a lab leak, but an example of natural spillover. Yeah, it's interesting how many people are involved in this whole thing, and how many how much of it is just crazy, right? So, Chapter 8, Naturally Acquired Immunity and Political Witch Hunt. In 2004, Fauci was on C-SPAN when a woman called in and said she had had the flu for 14 days, had been quite sick, but had avoided taking the flu vaccine because of her previous adverse reactions to the flu vaccine. The host then asked Dr. Fauci, but she's had the flu for 14 days. Should she get a flu shot? This was in 2004. In those days, before the pandemic politicalization of all public health, Fauci was swift and certain in his response. Well, no, if she got the flu for 14 days, she was protected as anybody can be, because the best vaccination is to get infected yourself. If she really has the flu, she definitely doesn't need a flu vaccine, he stated. Surviving the infection itself created more immunity than the vaccine. In fact, the immunity gained from infection was better than any vaccine. So when it all came out, No, if you've had COVID, then you should be you should be you should be vaccinated, right? And now they're saying you should have immunity. If you had COVID, you should have immunity. Well, no, your immunity wanes. Remember that? Remember that what they told us? Your immunity wanes. It your goes. You don't have immunity. You don't have memory cells. You don't have the immune cells that keep a memory of that for the first time ever. And what I did when this whole thing was going on, I saw a deal on DARPA, and it was on 60 Minutes. And it talked about how they went back to the 1918 Spanish flu. They have the 1918 Spanish flu in the lab at DARPA here in the United States. They went back, got the Spanish flu, created the flu again, created a vaccine for it, and that now they have a vaccine for the Spanish flu. But what they found when they tested the blood of people from all the way back to 1918, that this was done like in 2012 or something like this. So they had some 90-year-old people who actually had COVID, not COVID, the Spanish flu back in 1918. And the guy from DARPA says on the show, the 60 Minutes interview, he says, I was astounded. He said, you wouldn't believe it, but I was astounded that what we found out was these people still had memory cells, immune cells that had antibodies for the 1918 Spanish flu. And they were 90-something years old. And that's just stuff that we learned. I mean, every biology student in the history of mankind, since there's been biology students, has learned that. That's not something that's new. And when this thing was coming out, all I heard was over and over again, well, you got to get vaccinated, whether or not you've had it or not. You don't have any immunity to it. And it just makes me wonder, who's the one that's saying that? Where is that coming from? Here's one on mask hypocrisy and ignorance. I tried to reassure the poor flat earthers that all the people you'll meet today, I'm probably the safest person in Washington. You won't catch COVID from me. Their eyes visibly above their BLM and trust science mask, only narrowed in anger and angry and only narrowed in angry and impotent disbelief. Our media repeatedly and stupidly conflated the use of masks in clinical and surgical settings involving bodily fluids, spatter, and bacterial infection with effectiveness against viruses 10 times smaller than the smallest bacteria in the public setting. And Anthony Fauci played along, except, of course, in his private emails where he advised a personal friend not to bother masking since, of course, quote, the typical mask you buy in the drugstore is not really effective in keeping out viruses, which is a small enough to pass through material, end quote. Of course, while he was writing this privately, he was sanctimoniously lecturing me in a Senate hearing wearing a ridiculous Washington Nationals cloth mask. When I rightly called him out for his public health theater, he angrily and huffily denied that it was theater. I am still shocked at the childish ignorance and emotional response he gave by the media fawning response to it. I told the press and anyone who might be interested via Twitter, statements and press releases of the randomized controlled studies around the world included the large and telling Dan Mask study. Even the New York Times admitted researchers in Denmark reported on Wednesday that surgical masks did not protect the wearers against infection with the coronavirus in a large randomized clinical trial. As Anthony Lazzarino, MD, commented in the British Medical Journal, the Dan Mask 19 study proved that surgical face masks have limited air filtering capacity with respect to SARS-CoV-2. I offered them a large randomized controlled mask study of influenza from Vietnam that showed that cloth mask wearing group had more infections than the control group wearing no mask. As Dr. A.A. Chugtai and his co-authors concluded, rates of infection were consistently higher among those in the cloth mask group than the medical mask and control groups. If you have a cloth mask, remember we all had to wear the mask. Had patients get irate at me. I had patients quit chiropractic care over the mask thing, over the mask that I wore in my office. I got a letter from the Texas Board of Chiropractic Examiners right off the bat. Said you will follow the rules, you will do exactly what you're supposed to do, you will do all these things, you will wear a mask when you're seeing patients, or you will get fined. And one of my colleagues here in Lubbock, that's exactly what happened to him. He got fined because he wasn't wearing a mask. Why wasn't he wearing a mask? Because we've learned from the very beginning that it didn't work. But it made people feel comfortable when people were lying to them about this virus that they made in the lab. They made this virus in the lab, and then they created this hocus pocus crap that went along with it to make everybody get confused. And you can take this same philosophy and apply it to one thing after another thing after another thing. Now we've got these Ozempic stuff going on. And it's just the same. It's everybody's out there taking it. Now, I believe in freedom. I believe in freedom. If you want to take it, go ahead and take it. If you want to wear a mask, go ahead and wear a mask. If you want to take the virus, the deal, do what you want to do. That's not my. It's like, hey, look, that's not the thing. But to say that I'm somehow endangering you because I don't wear a mask, and somehow I'm endangering you because I don't get vaccinated, is false. It's just false, and it's false by people who do the studies. It's just researchers also showed that the mask mandates didn't slow down the spread of COVID-19. Damian Guerrera and Daniel Guerrera showed that mask mandates and use were not associated with a slower state-level COVID-19 spreading during COVID-19 growth surges. Many others, including noted epidemiologist Paul Alexander, PhD, found over 170 comparative studies and articles on the ineffectiveness of masks, and not one mainstream journalist bothered to read or attempt to refute the findings. Instead, they chose a strategy was to attack people not wearing masks as lacking empathy, right? You're lacking empathy. You don't care about other people. That's because you won't wear your mask. When there's study after study after study that said that we should wear a mask. And it's not your fault. If you're listening to the show, I'm not coming at you. I'm just sharing with you some information that comes from someone who is in the know in the middle of all of it and who's trying to tell us, look, how are you going to learn? How are you going to know what health is? And how are you going to know how to keep yourself healthy? When the people that you trust lie to you about things like a mask. If they lie to you about a mask and they lie to you and they come at you, Arnold Schwarzenegger, come out and say, screw yourself, right? Screw your rights. All those people, Tom Hanks, like one guy, Madonna's old husband, what's that? That dude, like, wouldn't work on a set, wouldn't talk to somebody, wouldn't do something if you weren't vaccinated. Now all of a sudden you got this popularity contest that's coming out. You got a bunch of people that have a bunch of money, these billionaires that have a bunch of money that is going to tell people they don't know about health. They're the wrong people. Arnold Schwarzenegger is the wrong person to be talking to me about screw your rights, right? He's telling me to screw my rights. No, I've studied health. I study health every single solitary day for the last 24 years. I've studied it in depth. I've studied the brain. I've studied the immune system. I've studied function. I went home and studied. I went home and studied exactly page 316. I'll just get to it because I don't want to run out of time on this one. But what the cytokine storm does and how the cytokine storm works and what is going on with the cytokine storm. So I'm going to read this to you. As researchers at Columbia University Medical Center reported, COVID-19 utilizes its ORF8 protein as a unique mechanism to alter the expression of surface MHC1 expression to evade immune surveillance. They had a way to evade your immune system and stay under the radar right there. If one and this is end quote. So if one were to design a bioweapon, creating a pathogen that can invade the immune system would be at the top of the list. A study from the Mayo Clinic links the ORF8 protein to severe COVID-19 infection and points to it as a possible culprit for the so-called cytokine storm. Clinicians taking care of COVID-19 patients describe a crisis they called a cytokine storm that occurs in the severely ill when one's bodily fluids leak into the air spaces of the lungs. Right? We've gone over this. We've talked about this. We did this on the show. We talked about this during COVID for all of the people in the office. We had this thing, and I learned it, just this process, on a weekend by going through all the articles about what a kind of cytokine storm is and how it works, right? That's what the cytokine storm was talking about. And this comes right straight from the book right here. Clinicians taking care of COVID-19 patients describe a crisis they call a cytokine storm that occurs in the severely ill when one's bodily fluids leak into the air spaces of the lungs. Why do the bodily fluids leak into the air spaces of the lungs? The bodily fluids leak into the air spaces of the lungs because the fluids are following the white blood cells. That's why they go into the lungs in the first place. They're following the white blood cells. In the alveolar sacs inside our lungs, there's the sac, here's the cells, here's the air, there's a cell, there's a nucleus, there's a cell, there's a nucleus, there's a cell. You got these cells inside your lungs right here. Guess what's in those cells that protects you right there? So here's the air that's coming in right there. The air comes in, the virus is in the air. It's going to try to attach to the cell walls. What is the number one thing right there that's there to protect us? Glutathione. Glutathione. It's in your lung cells. What depletes glutathione from the lung? Tylenol. Acetaminophen. NyQuil. Acetaminophen. It depletes glutathione, takes it into the liver because that's how you get rid of it, right? But when the fight is on and you've got blood, and all of a sudden, you've got blood vessels, and they've got cells too, and these blood vessels have these cells. There's little gaps in between them, and here comes the white blood cell, the neutrophil, really. Here comes the white blood cell, and the white blood cell is going to come around here, and it's going to go to fight what's going on when COVID shows up and tries to dock right there. We got glutathione fighting it. The white blood cell is now going to try to it's got to morph itself. It's got to change shape. It's got to move through those cells right there. It's got to come into that lung alveolar sac, and we got to fight it right there. That's what the white blood cell is going to try to do. When it does that and it tries to scoot itself through, plasma from the blood leaks in as well. And now we've got fluid in the lung. And if we get too much fluid in the lung, then we will end up drowning. And that's one of the things that my people. So the question is, if you have too much fluid, if you have too many white blood cells, then you have too much fluid in the lung. Well, why do you get too many white blood cells? The number one thing that causes too many white blood cells is inflammation. And what is inflammation? It's an omega-6-3 ratio problem. The people that were high in omega-6s are the ones that filled their lungs up with fluid, and they're the ones that died, and they came from exactly this thing right here that went on. So, hey, we're running out of time. I wanted to cover the book. If you guys want to read it, you can read it. It's great. It gets into all the stuff going on right there. It breaks it down pretty clearly for us all. And so if you guys want to read it, I hope I didn't offend anybody, but I just wanted to let you know that if you want to talk about health, you should talk to health people about it. And you got to watch out for those guys out there that are making billions and billions of dollars over all this stuff that they're trying to get us with. So Anyway, that's the show. That's the book review. You guys have a great evening. I'll be back tomorrow night at 6, and we'll talk about diabetes and how it destroys your nervous system.